everyone. Welcome back to the Humans of Neuroscience interview series. We know it's been some time since we last touched base, but we are back with a really, really amazing scientist and human, and I'm super excited to get to interview her and learn more about her journey. So please welcome Ali to the YouTube channel. Woo!
Hey, thanks for having me. This is so exciting.
Wonderful, wonderful. Ali, would you mind starting us off with kind of your elevator pitch of what you do in the science world, just so we can kind of get the gears turning, get those thought bubbles running?
Yeah, so I had a really weird path getting here, but ultimately, my current dissertation research is looking at the way symbolic violence is portrayed online in gaming communities. So, how do we use language and communication as a way to maintain power structures in a virtual space?
Wonderful. Wow. Very, very kind of contemporary topic. Like it's definitely I mean, I'm just thinking about like folks I know in like new game space, for instance,
Mhm.
who, seeing a friend play Call of Duty the other day. So that's a really, really interesting, relevant topic. What kind of got you started in this avenue, since I'm assuming it's like a niche topic?
Yeah, so really I'm a trained anthropologist,
Mhm.
and all of my previous work has been done with chimpanzees and gorillas. And I've always been really curious about why do we do the things that we do? And I also, in my free time, enjoy playing video games. I play Dungeons and Dragons. I'm a really big nerd. I met my husband playing Dungeons and Dragons. It's really just part of our lives. And I think most people who identify as women who enter into gaming spaces can sometimes feel a little uncomfortable or um, judged. And especially with things like Gamergate that happened, where we really had this kind of violent, aggressive pushback against women in this space, it was important for me to kind of understand the ways in which our understandings of media and culture are working in our brains to kind of continue and perpetuate these systems in an online space where ultimately we're anonymous.
Yeah, wow. I've definitely noticed that. I mean, kind of Twitter space even, right? There's so many
Yes,
folks that hide behind
absolutely.
and they kind of say things that they probably wouldn't say in person.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting. The kind of almost it feels like a switch flips in people's minds. Very
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah. And it's the ways that you embody yourself online and carry with you, I guess, your baggage or your place. Um, and and that's always so fascinating because if you can be anybody online, like, and not in a weird way, but like you can go be a wizard and run around with a bunch of people all over the world. You can be whoever you want. Why be the worst version of you?
That's fair. Yeah, absolutely. Have you kind of seen any interesting trends or shifts over the past few years, especially since now, like with the video games kind of also going into this VR space, the metaverse, all these different kind of concepts and technologies have popped up too. Have you seen any kind of shifts in the way that research conversations are happening in your field, let's say, or just even the way that you have approached your research?
So I so far have kind of stayed out of the embodied avatar land, but I work with a lab that does a lot of research in media, just generally. And so, um, one of the gentlemen in our lab, his dissertation was looking at when people identify with their avatar in, I believe it was Skyrim, how likely are they to engage in aggression against non-player characters? Um, and so, really connecting ourselves into the space can change the way that we interact with it. Um, Additionally, especially after Gamergate, we kind of saw this self-reflection with a lot of individuals who had power in the space, being like, oh no, this is not the way. um, we're going to advocate more openly for women in our spaces, as well as BIPOC and LGBT individuals, make it more welcoming so that they don't think that this is what it is. And that keeps getting challenged as video game companies continue to progress in representation. There's a new Grand Theft Auto coming out.
Uh,
Protagonist is a woman. Yeah, woo, I don't know how to. Yay, we can do violence and I don't know, get chased by the cops too. But if you can believe it, there's a big space on Twitter that's really upset about it.
wow. Yeah.
Mhm.
That's super interesting. Yeah, like when you stop and think about it, it's like it's very cool. Yeah, there's a woman, but I'm still doing the same exact things.
Exactly.
We're still in the
Yes.
same exact situation.
Mm.
Yeah, how interesting. Yeah. Um, I'm really curious about kind of the background and how you've like kind of over the years, I mean, being an anthropologist by training and then kind of in this like psychology, neuroscience application space as well. Um, what kind of prompted that shift for you over the years? Kind of, did you always know that this was a topic of interest, or was that something that developed along the way?
It's it's been a bit of a development. I've always been curious about it. But when I was sort of switching from undergrad into my master's program, I was really trying to decide if I was maybe going to go out into the field and do studies on wild populations. I opted to study zoo populations instead, and visitor interaction. Um, and I came up to Iowa State to work with Jill Preetz, who is amazing. And then as I started my doctoral work, um, she moved down to Texas, where she currently is.
Mhm.
And I was going to be replicating developmental child studies on bonobos. We have the ACCI, the Ape Cognition and Conservation Institute, in my area. And so they're classic studies of when children watch Sesame Street versus Power Rangers and their sharing behaviors after. And I would like to model that on bonobos.
Mhm.
And they were kind of shifting some stuff around. So my co-advisor and I kind of decided maybe let's shift to a more stable population to study, which is another really interesting ape undergraduate students. um, and so it kind of went from there. He does Doug Gentile does a lot of work with mindfulness and media, and I kind of brought in this background of anthropology, this idea of really contextualizing what's going on. We do a lot in psychology that says this is what is happening, and that's really helpful to know. But I don't see as many works going into like, and this is how we can place it within our world. This is
Mhm.
how this is helpful or not helpful, or ways that we can implement change and understanding. And so that's kind of the thread that pulled me through to taking a more systemic understanding of how people are operating individually within the context of online gaming culture.
Wow. Yeah, it's so amazing that your work has such direct connections to just public discourse compared
Mhm.
to, I'm thinking about, well, no shade to the mitochondrial scientist, but it,
Fair.
it feels like there's so much more that needs to go from talking about mitochondrial DNA, let's say,
Mhm.
to like things that we can talk about day to day, connecting with friends on Twitter, social media.
Yeah.
Um, do you feel like there's an increased responsibility or kind of a different role that you feel like you have to embody as someone whose research has like can have such direct translations?
Yes, I feel very responsible for good science communication.
Yes.
I know it's so much easier to not engage, especially because when you're talking about people's media behaviors or you're talking about violence in video games, the media storm around that has been so negative, um, that, being able to be like, no, that's not really what we're saying, is important, um, especially when you're trying to understand what's going on with, um, less represented communities
Mhm.
in the space. Um, yeah, I think we need to be able to understand what's going on and then helpfully communicate it, because media are powerful
Right.
for good and for bad. And so being able to minimize the negatives and improve the positives, it it requires us to be able to explain why it matters and how it's happening.
Absolutely. Um, and it's definitely a role that I'm assuming you had to kind of step into as a result of the work itself, and maybe one that you weren't necessarily formally trained for. Was that correct in your experiences?
Yeah, I am lucky insofar as a hobbyist, I have a background in theater, so I don't have a problem public speaking. I enjoy talking to people. I love talking about research.
Uh-huh.
Um, and so I'm a little more comfortable stepping in than I know a lot of like scientists would be, um, expected to be or assumed to be. But a lot of us, I think, want to step into that space and maybe just don't know how, or
Right.
feel pushback depending on what the content of your research is.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, even at the undergrad level, people coming in, they're like, I would love to do science engagement, but where do I start?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
there's
and
no
even
how
for
to
the
list.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
exactly. And even for those mitochondrial DNA scientists, like who's kind of sitting us down and telling us, here's your responsibility as a
Yeah.
scientist,
Yes.
beyond just let's get into academia and let's publish, and that's it.
Yeah.
So certainly an evolving relationship with the public.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm personally in public health a bit. So with the whole pandemic and everything going haywire, to put it lightly,
Yeah. Oh my
I
goodness.
yeah, it just really illustrated the need for folks who are kind of in that middle ground.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Be able to debunk some things and helpfully communicate
Mhm.
helpful messages to
Right?
people. It's a lot though, especially
Absolutely.
if you were really dropped into it.
Hmm.
Oh my gosh, I can't imagine.
Oh yeah. There were so many like virologists who all of a sudden people are stopping them, at the grocery store and they're like, so tell me
Oh
about it. And
gosh.
I can't even imagine what that would be like.
Oh,
Yeah. I find it so cool that you like mentioned your theater interest and hobby had kind of translated into your kind of science aspect of being human.
mm.
I was curious of like if you can think back of like any other interests, hobbies, activities that you just naturally had growing up and even now that also supported your development as like someone in the sciences.
Yeah. I I was an avid reader. I was always a really curious kid. I feel very badly for my mother now that I'm an adult, because I still to this day I'll be driving somewhere with my husband and being like, "Hey, why do you think the corn's growing like this?" Or I was just thinking about the length of Chile and I wonder how long it takes to drive it. Like I I had a lot of exposure to a lot of literature and I was a big nerd. So I have like the complete works of Shakespeare and Jane Austen, all of these things. I read dictionaries as a kid. I was a little peculiar. And thankfully my family was pretty accepting of that. Um, and so I've always wanted to answer questions. However, I had one of my undergraduate degrees is in philosophy. I just want to know things
Mhm.
and think about things. Um, and science is a good way to be able to think about something, but then also get an answer.
Right. That's so true. Yeah, I love that. I still feel like I'm the annoying question person of the family too, so I resonate.
Yeah.
There's got to be one of us, right?
There has to be.
Yeah, all the weird questions, always, always.
Mhm.
Yeah. Something that I was also really curious about is during undergrad, I was a medical humanities student, and I constantly had that feeling of I feel like I'm not quite in the science space and I'm not
Yes.
quite in the humanities. I'm somewhere in there.
Hmm.
And I would really love to hear your kind of experiences on someone who's bridging different communities and checking different boxes than what might be the norm of a scientist, right? Of like, I study this, but I also study this, I have interest in this and that and that.
Hmm.
Um, how do you think we can like make that space more open, welcoming for younger folks,
Yeah.
especially? A lot of our community is really interested in being like cross-disciplinary as they go into their studies. So we're always looking to like explore and connect with early career folks like
Yeah.
yourselves who are like on the cusp of that change. Would just love to hear any thoughts you have.
I was surprised by how welcoming each of the communities were.
Mhm.
So, in my human computer interaction and my psychology coursework, being able to bring to the table what I had as an anthropologist in contextualizing things was really helpful and led to a lot of really good communication and discussions and discoveries over there. And then over in my anthropology coursework, being able to bring in an understanding of psychology and media really helped kind of push discussions over in that field as well. And so while it feels kind of weird and liminal to be between the two, you're really providing an opportunity for the people around you. And I've never had anyone really respond negatively to me about bringing in an interdisciplinary commentary or questions or thoughts. So, like, make your space and like own that you have an expertise and you have thoughts that each of these groups individually don't have, and you're connecting that for them and helping that flow of knowledge.
Right. Oh, I love that. I love that. It's kind of like the analogy of like everyone says interdisciplinary is having so many different people around the table.
Mm-hmm.
But then you can kind of come in and be like, well, I am that table. I
Yes,
am
you can
everything
be
in one.
the table.
Yes, I am your centerpiece.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really, I'm really glad that kind of you've had that welcoming experience of like people just encouraging you to pursue your interests and really accepting that you kind of explore outside of the boundaries as well. I think that's would love to see more of that atmosphere just across academia in general without siloing people.
I completely agree. We all do such interesting things and can really help every other field just have different considerations or maybe learn how to ask questions slightly differently that gains you, this unlocks this whole other area that you can think about. We don't have to just like sit in our labs by ourselves. We can expand and do more, think
Absolutely.
more. Yeah.
Yeah. And I feel like especially as we kind of study psychology, the brain, its
Hmm.
implications, like we have so much more flexibility
Yes,
of
absolutely.
intertwining everything. So,
Hmm.
yeah. Well, interdisciplinary is the next big movement, right? And we're leading it. So
Yes.
amazing, amazing. Well, thank you so much for all of your time today. It was so interesting kind of hearing
So,
all these ebbs and flows and this whole web of kind of picking your brain a little bit.
absolutely.
Yeah. Are there any kind of, oh, it's always weird to say like final words, a little morbid, but
Mhm.
concluding reflections for any students who might be interested in pursuing similar topics or just kind of starting out on their, what you like to call brain journey?
Yeah. Don't be afraid to do interdisciplinary research that makes sense to you or feels good to you. I had a really difficult time getting my dissertation together because I was so focused on I'm in a psychology program, I'm a psychologist now. But I'm a psychologist who is an anthropologist. I'm an anthropologist doing psychology. So you have this whole area of theory and knowledge that you can apply and make your questions and not someone else's questions. Um, and so, yeah, figure out what are your questions. Just like find what you don't know and what you want to know. And that takes you a lot of really cool places.
Yeah, that's so powerful. Finding your own questions.
Mhm.
Yeah. Wow. Gotta think about that more. What are my questions, right?
Yeah.
What are they? What are they? Yeah, that's wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Ali. It's so lovely chatting with you today. I feel like I have not crossed paths with many folks in anthropology, so a completely different space that I will go look into and read more about.
Me too. We're an interesting people, the anthropologists.
An interesting bunch.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for your time
Thank
and take
you.
care.
Bye, YouTube.